Welcome to the Knowledge for Men show. Your life will never be the same.
Your level of success will seldom exceed your level of personal development.
I want to die empty of regret. I want to die empty of my best work. We don't understand who we are. Instead, we're living out somebody else's narrative.
What one man can do, another man can do. If it's been done, it can be done again.
Being yourself and being your truest, most authentic self in every moment. If it scares you or makes you a little afraid, do it. Follow your heart and your gut.
The first stage, I think, is finding you, like finding out who I am today.
Stuff will not work. You will have things that fail. Success is when you're a happy, fulfilled person. How do you define success?
It's your life, and you are the creator of the movie script that is your life story.
Do you ever feel like you're doing the journey alone? Have you ever felt like that you just need someone to talk to, someone who could bring some perspective into your world? Or maybe you're not the type of person who learns from watching video courses or reading books, and you just want to talk with someone specifically about your challenges and how to break through them. I want to introduce you to the High Performance Men's Coaching Program. It's an intensive coaching experience designed to unlock a man's full potential in his life, business, and relationships. Over this past year, I've brought together and trained some of the best coaches in the world to help men step up, stop playing small, and become the strongest versions of themselves. Learn more about High Performance Men's Coaching at kfmcoach.com. Again, that's kfmcoach.com. You are not alone, and we are here to cut through the crap, hold you accountable, and challenge you so that you can make your dreams become a reality. Go to kfmcoach.com to learn more and apply. All right, guys, welcome to the show. I'm here with Jon Levy. He's a human behavior scientist. He travels the world studying the science of adventure. He's also the author of the 2 a.m. Principle, Discover the Science of Adventure. A couple of quick fun things here. He's ran with the Bulls in Pamplona. You've battled Kiefer Sutherland in Jenga. You've crashed multi-million-dollar weddings. Just sounds like a really fun activities going on here. Jon, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I get myself in quite a bit of trouble wherever I go.
Have you been in jail for this kind of adventure?
Absolutely not. I've never been
caught.
I guess the word is caught. I was thinking about that. I was like, I've never done anything illegal. I'm sure I've done things that are illegal. Nothing that people would really care about. Like I've never stolen a car or, destroyed a piece of public property or something like that. But I spend a lot of my time crossing social boundaries. And part of that is because when you look at what causes us to live an exciting and remarkable life, the fact is that we need to participate in things that make us grow, that are outside of our comfort zone. So if I get an idea in my head that I think, oh, that'll make me uncomfortable doing that, it's probably a good idea.
When do you draw the line between what's outside of your comfort zone for fun and adventure and being, how do I say this without like...
A jerk.
A jerk, and also just socially, just completely out of context. What is that word? A social... I can't think of the word right now, but someone who just, they don't understand like the social cues.
Inept. Somebody who's socially inept.
Socially inept, but you're doing it on purpose though. You're not actually...
Oh, yeah, I'd call that a jerk.
Okay.
So I think the key here is I'm going to take a step back. And when I started looking at adventure, people would tell me that they happened by chance, that they were completely random. And I said that didn't make much sense because if they were, we'd all live similarly exciting lives. But we don't. So that means there has to be something that really adventurous people embody, that the rest of us may or may not. And if I could quantify that, then all of us could live more exciting lives if that's what we want. And I had to start by defining what an adventure is. And there was no definition out there that made any sense to me. So I had to create one. And my definition of adventure is it's an experience that is, one, exciting and remarkable. This is really important because as a species, we've passed on our knowledge for millennia through an oral history. And if it's not worth talking about, it's not culturally significant. And the second characteristic is it possesses adversity and or risk. And here's what I think you're speaking to. It's preferable that it's perceived risk, meaning there's a difference between putting yourself in direct danger like I was when I got crushed by a bull in Pamplona.
Yeah, we'll come
and
back
almost
to that.
died. and a perceived risk like skydiving. Skydiving is incredibly safe. I think there's something like 3 deaths out of 3 million jumps or something like that a year. You're just not going to get hurt if you go skydiving. if you go to running of the bulls, there's a good chance something's going to happen. And so I have, through my experiences, I do generally like a back of the napkin estimation of how dangerous something actually is. How negatively will I impact a restaurant if I start serenading one of the guests with a song? How dangerous is it to climb a 3-story tall statue, which I did this weekend, 2:00 in the morning on my way home. I was like, oh, that's a really cool statue. I bet it has a great view. And I started climbing and didn't stop. And then I looked down and I was like, what am I doing? This is a terrible idea.
Sounds fun. Okay. And what kind of quote do you have for us? Something that you've lived by, something that, like when you're about to climb up a 3-story statue, when you're going to sing a song in a restaurant and serenade the guests, when you're running bulls with Pamplona, is there something that you tell yourself in the back of your head that sparks this creativity?
Without a doubt. To explain it, I want to just say the third characteristic of an adventure is that it brings about growth. The person you are at the end is distinct from the person who started, right? No great hero's journey has the hero end the same way they started. So one of the things that always runs through my mind is that the size of our life is in direct proportion to how uncomfortable we're willing to be. And so I wish people incredibly uncomfortable lives. And I think that if it's just going to make me uncomfortable, and it's not going to kill me, it's probably worth doing.
The size of our life is in direct proportion to the amount of discomfort?
How uncomfortable we're willing to be, right?
What comes to mind here, too, is that I think this is an important message for men. Henry David Thoreau has that quote where the massive men live lives of quiet desperation, where and then you can go on and on, where they're doing things they don't like to impress people, they don't care, to buy things, that whole thing. And I think a part of being a man is really being the hero of your own life story. And I think what you bring to the table here with adventure, in my opinion, is the hero's journey. It's one big adventure.
It's a really wonderful comparison you make, because I think when we look at what makes a great journey, it's the same thing that makes a great story. So, and the journey of our lives, hopefully we're the protagonists. And that means that we're going to have to come face to face with failure continuously, that we're going to have to deal with that inner conversation that has us want to quit. But the great gift of adventure isn't just the memories and the stories. It's that we're a better human being at the end of it. We've expanded our capacity. We've learned lessons and we've grown. And without these adventures in our lives, we just don't get to experience that.
You could become the extra in your own movie. How about that? And so now I think here, so you're a scientist. You're a real scientist, or are you self-proclaimed?
I work out of Moran Surf's lab, which is called C Lab. So I do research and I work on papers and all that kind of stuff.
I wasn't sure if it's something you made up. Like, I have this term, I say I'm a men's coach. It's like, that's just what I say I am. I don't know if you say you're just a scientist because of what you do. So being a scientist, I'm kind of thinking you are someone who very good, very smart, good in class, academic.
Oh God, no.
Not so social. Spending a lot of time in the lab. Were you always this adventurous? Was this always the case here, Jon?
So first of all, I was rarely, if ever, studious in my early years. And not only that, I was incredibly awkward, uncomfortable, and unpopular. So in 8th grade, my teacher threw out our seating chart. And she said, everybody gets to submit privately 2 people they want to sit with and 2 people they don't. And through an unfortunate series of events, I discovered 2 things. The first was that there was this one kid nobody wanted to sit with. The second part was that I was that kid. And so not only was I like unpopular, I was like typhoid Mary or something. Like, nobody wanted to be anywhere near me. I was diseased. And, I don't blame my classmates. I definitely don't blame my teacher, because back then there were no cool geeks. I liked watching Star Trek and playing with computers. And that time there were no iPhones. There was no superhero movies the way we see all of the like X-Men and Captain America and all that. And so there was no culture that embraced being a geek. Now you can be a geek and you can be the coolest person around. Yeah. And so I was relegated to the sidelines, and I wanted to figure out what caused people to connect, what caused them to engage. And, I went to my favorite academic for answers because he seemed like he lived a really incredible life. And I don't know if you know the work of Henry Walton Jones Jr.
No, I don't.
No? He is a archaeologist. Most people know him by his nickname Indiana Jones.
Okay.
And
I know that guy,
he's been to like temples of doom and looked for arcs and all that kind of stuff.
I didn't know this was a real guy. My mind
no, it's not a real guy.
Oh, okay. I was like,
it's
wow.
just the actual name of the character is Henry Walton Jones Jr.
Okay.
And so I asked the question of what is it that this character embodies, and what does Ferris Bueller embody?
Yeah.
And that maybe if I could learn from it, I could live a more exciting life. I could be more popular, or liked, or connect with people. Because, when you're in 8th grade, your entire world is your social circle. And I have no idea what just happened here. The lights it went completely dark. Okay. Now the lights are back on.
You turned into like the Darth Sidious. You turned into like a dark Jedi just now. The audience can't see, but his lights just went off in the interview, and I just saw his eyes. And but continue on. I'm really enjoying where you're going with this.
And so when you're in 8th grade, your entire world is your classroom. And if you don't fit in there, where do you fit in? And how do you win those people over? And I just didn't know how to do it. And it took literally years of trial and error. I tried to watch the shows that they watched, but that was completely inauthentic. And I got called out for it because I didn't care about what was happening on Melrose Place or 90210. And so I kept going to science for answers. And slowly but surely, I came across all these research studies that looked at what causes people to connect. And I ran my own social experiments, and I kept learning from them. And so, I'll give you an example. Have you ever heard of the Ben Franklin effect?
No, go ahead.
This is one of my favorite quirks of human behavior. We all know that if I do you a favor, you'll like me more.
Right. Reciprocity.
Right? Yep. You'll feel socially obligated. It's part of what's kept us alive as a species for so long, is that we contribute back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
But if I ask you to do me a favor and you do it, you'll end up liking me more. And the reason is that those things that you invest effort into, you value. You assume that because you invested effort into me, you'll like me more. I'm somebody worthy of that effort.
Example.
I'll give you the backstory to it and an example. So Franklin had this contentious political rival, and instead of trying to win him over by being nice, he asked to borrow a very rare book. And when the man provided it, from that point onward, they became friends. And there's several famous experiments that were done on this concept, but a simple one was, as people were walking down the street, they were asked for directions that were complex. A certain percentage of the time they'd get the answer, a lot of the time they wouldn't. Then in the next round, they asked people first for the time and then for the directions. Those people who had invested the time were then more willing to invest into giving directions, because the moment that you've given yourself the moment that you've invested the effort into something, you begin to value it more.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the ways that I like to begin a relationship or connect with strangers, even if I'm just traveling, is that I'll ask them for a small favor and then a slightly larger favor. And then I'll do something for them and then ask for an even slightly larger favor. So it builds up the practice of reciprocity back and forth and the connection between us. But that's, a very simple example of, throughout the book, I actually have, I think, something like 20 scientific studies that I point out, ranging from neuroscientific studies on how we respond to novelty and how it entices us to explore, all the way through to the most critical elements that cause us to develop curiosity, or what causes us to remember things positively. So we really dive deep into it. And while I share a 4-stage process for turning any experience into an adventure, as told through these crazy stories of, like I said, getting crushed by a bull, or at one point I convinced the woman behind the duty-free counter to leave her job and travel with me for a week within 10 seconds of meeting.
So that's called pickup. I'm just kidding. No, I'm kidding.
She came with me and my entire family.
Okay.
It wasn't like a date.
I know. So she quit.
Yeah,
she just quit. And are you in a different country doing this, or
you're
at an airport?
The
right?
story goes that I was in 5:17 a.m. I was in Stockholm Arlanda Airport. It was July 3rd, 2014. I was with my best friend, Liam Alexander, and we were checking out of duty free. And as you check out of duty free, they ask you for your flight ticket to confirm that you're leaving the European Union so that you don't pay taxes.
Right.
And she goes, "Oh, Israel." And I go, "Yeah, do you want to come?" And I'm like, I'm not even thinking about it. I'm just joking. And she goes, "Yeah." And I say, "Great, then come." And she goes, "I'd love to, but I'm a grad student and it's really expensive." And I'm like, "What if I paid for your trip?" And she pauses and stares at me kind of awkwardly for a moment. And you could see that she's like, "Is this guy for real? What's going on here?" And then she goes, "Okay." 24 hours later, she had left her job, picked up her passport and her bag, and got on a plane to Israel.
Was it her first time?
There, yeah.
And what if she was crazy?
That was a real risk.
What if you were crazy?
That was less of a risk. I mean, there's enough about me out there that, like, if you Google my name, if I was actually crazy, there'd be, stuff about.
There'd be something, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But in her case, I did Google her, and she had the most common name out there.
Uh-huh.
So nothing showed up.
Oh, I see.
And so it was an actual risk. I wasn't the type of person who says yes to these types of things is either completely insane or the coolest person you've ever met, and you end up wanting to be best friends with them for life.
Right. Yeah.
And luckily she wasn't insane because I was traveling with my nieces and nephews.
Wow, that's I'm wondering if guys are like, single guys are like, "Oh wow, I'm going to go to duty free and start asking girls to come with me to Israel." But I get the energy behind. I get what you're doing here. You have these different stages of adventure.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering now, how do you view risk? And how do most people view risk, like the general population? I want to see the difference here.
So let's begin with one important distinction, which is everybody's tolerance for risk and discomfort or novelty even are really different, right? So I feel very comfortable with very high levels of perceived risk, but I don't feel very comfortable with high levels of peril. I'm not going to go base jumping because to me, the risk is too high for somebody who's untrained like myself, right? You might be able to do it really safely if you're a trained base jumper, but that's not me. So what does that actually mean though for my perception of risk? Well, I have a general view, and that is that risk is the catalyst to personal growth, or at least the experience of risk is, right? You don't actually have to do something that puts you in any direct danger, but it's the experience of risk that's the catalyst for personal growth. It's that feeling when you're at a bar and you're scared to talk to the table next to you. It's the feeling of standing at the edge of a platform as you're going to go bungee jumping. In neither case are you actually in any direct danger, but your body gives you this gift of fear. And when you overcome that, that's when you have the reward. That's when you have the expanded comfort zone. That's when your body floods with testosterone and dopamine and so on, and you get this rush and experience of success. So here's what we know. If you look at research by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, the person who did all the work on flow state, like peak human performance, right? Yeah. If you want to enter a state of peak human performance, there are three characteristics that need to be at play. One is that you have to be doing something that requires skill. The second is it has to be outside of your skill set. And the reason for that is that if you're not reaching for something, you're bored and you're not going to engage fully, right? If I asked you to stack blocks for hours on end, you'll be bored. You're not going to be engaged. It also can't be so hard that you're constantly failing. And so the key is to find that Goldilocks state where it's just outside your comfort zone, but not so much that you're in a state of consistent failure. Some people call this optimal anxiety. It's a state where you're motivated and engaged, but not so much that you're like falling apart.
Right.
And so the key here isn't that there's a right level of optimal anxiety. It's that there's a level of optimal anxiety for you. Finding out that you're going to be giving the next big presentation, your office meeting, might be really exciting. Finding out that you're giving it on the TED stage might be overwhelming and you freak out.
Yeah. And so how do you view risk now? And how would you say most people view risk?
So for me, if it's a perceived risk, I'm willing to do just about anything unless I think that it's going to traumatize me. Right. So I just went free diving, and it's super safe and awesome. And I went, pretty far down, but at a certain point, I'm like, I'm not willing to go any further because the reward isn't going to be there. Now, I think the way that other people in general view it is that they have an aversion for being uncomfortable. And if you're not willing to be uncomfortable, then there can't be any growth. There can't be the reward. And so I think that they shut off this, or like hit the safety valve just before things are going to get good. And I would say if they were willing to increase perceived risk or be uncomfortable with the perceived risk for longer, their life would be much, much more engaged.
So can we say to maximize growth in a man's life, he should maximize risk?
No, I would say to maximize growth, maximize perceived risk. So you can do things that are incredibly safe, right? You can have a life full of growth and accomplishment that don't require any peril. But you can't have a life with growth without, at the very least, levels of perceived risk. I can give you an example from the business world.
Okay.
When you look at this is one of my favorite examples. When you look at the team that started Warby Parker, there's this misnomer that entrepreneurs throw caution to the wind, they quit their jobs, take their life savings, and invest it into this company. But if you actually look at the successful entrepreneurs, they were like the Warby Parker team. What they did was they held on to their internships and jobs long past the point that Warby Parker was being successful. And the reason was that it wasn't a necessary risk to take. The perceived risk of already investing their time and effort and money is enough. And so you want to hedge back all the things that actually produce actual risk and take on those things that have perceived risk. Because unless you're in, a military unit that has to take on a mission, there isn't really the necessity for major risks or peril rather.
So it seems like we can take small steps towards where we want to go. And so it's like little risk stacked up over time. But as we continue taking these little risks, we're actually reducing the danger at the end because we're slowly getting in rather than just diving in fully.
Yes. My attitude is that the key is just to always be doing something at the edge of your comfort zone. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you will find a lot more progress from that than you will trying to throw yourself in day one, full on, and destroying yourself, right? I remember seeing kids go into day one of wrestling training with full body sweatsuits, but they hadn't built up the tolerance to be able to handle that kind of stuff. And, then they're less likely to participate. So the key is incremental growth. You don't have to go crazy and traumatize yourself in the process.
If there was some sort of drug, there probably is, it's probably called cocaine, but if there was some sort of drug where it would eliminate your feelings of fear in the world, what would that world look like? Would that be a good drug to take? Let's not use cocaine. Let's say there's a healthier form where it would reduce your fear. And I'm not saying I would like this or this is something that I would want to take myself, but you being a human behavior scientist, what would that world look like in terms of people taking new action?
So there's a big story behind this. They've actually found people who don't process fear. And what happens is that they cognitively understand the idea that they could be injured, but their actions aren't consistent with that. So they end up getting hurt a lot. I think, if memory serves, I could have this one wrong. They'll accidentally leave their kids playing in dangerous environments, not realizing that they should remove them from them. They'll take a knife and chop, and then they'll cut themselves and be like, oh man, that's too bad. But fear is healthy.
Right.
Fear has kept us alive, not only as a species, but through the evolutionary process since the dawn of, cellular growth, whatever it is. And so a world without fear probably wouldn't leave many of us around. We'd probably get into fights that get us killed. There's this actual crazy quirk of mammal biology. I don't know if it's all mammals have it, but I know that there's plenty that do. And it's called the winner effect. And it works like this. Let's say I take on a challenge and I win. My body floods with testosterone. There's also other things like adrenaline, dopamine, all those, right? And that prepares me for my next challenge or battle. So let's say I'm a ram in nature. I win a battle. I'm flooded with testosterone. The next time I get into a fight, I have a higher chance of winning because I'm already flooded with testosterone. With each additional win, I increase the amount of testosterone in my system. This fills me with confidence, and it makes it more likely that I'll win. The problem is, though, it also makes me very aggressive and thinking that I'm invincible. So I'll get into unnecessary fights, which will eventually get me killed, or it leads animals to spend time in the open and get hunted because they think they're invincible. So what does a world look like? It looks like probably a world where a lot of people get die for stupid reasons or get injured for stupid reasons. And then also it looks like a world where there might be a lot of aggression, because the first time I came across this was in a book called The Hour Between Wolf and Dog. And the author's argument was that this was one of the biggest reasons for the subprime mortgage fiasco, because traders would keep winning in their bets, and then they'd take riskier and riskier bets. And then because they were so flooded with testosterone, they thought they couldn't lose. And they eventually made bets that were too big, and everything fell apart.
Yeah.
He actually argues that, and you were talking about cocaine, that adrenaline, or rather testosterone, is the biggest drug you should worry about in Wall Street traders, not cocaine.
So fear keeps us alive, but we can say that it holds us back from peak potential?
I would say that fear keeps us alive, and it doesn't always serve us. That in most of the cases that we're afraid, in most of them, we're not afraid of anything that actually can have a negative impact on us.
Yeah.
And then in a very important collection of cases, it does keep us alive, like walking into oncoming traffic or not getting into a fight with that really big guy who, scuffed your shoe at a club. But in the overwhelming majority of cases, like public speaking or approaching somebody who you think is cute, that's where it really holds us back.
So is risk and pursuing the risk, is it, if we are doing this at a small level, is it like a muscle? Because you're saying that your risk tolerance is much higher than maybe someone else's, and also mine, and maybe a listener. We all have different varying levels, but can it be like a muscle where we exercise it on a daily basis and that risk tolerance increases, thus increasing our state of adventure in our lives?
So I would say without a doubt. First of all, the winner effect shows us that, right? That if you get let's say your confidence is really low, then get a few small wins under your belt and then keep the momentum going. At a certain point, even if you get a loss along the way, it won't be a big deal because you'll have built up so much momentum. It's called a flywheel concept, right? So you look at a flywheel, you add momentum to it by spinning it and spinning it and spinning it. Eventually it has so much momentum that even if it hits a bit of friction, it'll keep spinning. And so the key is to keep getting these wins under your belt so that when you come across something that's a failure, it just doesn't bug you anymore.
Would you recommend something like 30-day challenges?
I love them. I do a big thing. I do annual challenges, but I have very specific rules around them. So in 2015, my challenge was to go to all 7 continents in 1 year. I had no idea how I was going to pay for it. It's really expensive to go to a lot of these places.
Yeah.
In 2013, I did every month the biggest event in the world. This year, my challenge is to become superhuman. So I'm learning 6 to 12 new skills that are on the peak of human ability. So increase my memory, Wim Hof, which is cold proofing your body, holding my breath, and doing free diving.
I've seen it, yeah.
So the key, and this is my strategy, is first of all, it's not a resolution, or you want to call it a challenge, that's fine. But for me, it's a project. And the reason is that, like with New Year's resolutions and things like that, if it's go to the gym every day, and you miss a day, you feel like you failed.
Right.
But if it's a project, then you can have setbacks and you can account for them.
It's a part of it.
Yeah.
It's more.
It's expected.
It's expected. I like that.
the other thing is that when you have a project, you don't just show up day one, throw all of your energy at it, and then see what happens. You plan. So if, let's say, your project is to get to 7% body fat, whatever it is, or just lose 20 pounds or hit a specific goal weight. If it's a project, you do research. What's the most effective way to lose weight? What will actually fit into my lifestyle? Going to the gym might not make sense, but I can commit to a half-hour walk every day and reducing my calorie intake. So you have to look at it from the perspective of what makes sense within the system and or budget, right? And your lifestyle. And then look at what works. So you're doing research and you build up your network. And then the other thing is that you want to take a look at the difference between the result that you're looking for and the skill set necessary to accomplish that result. So if it's lose 20 pounds, that's the result. The skill isn't losing weight. Yeah. Right? The skill is connecting with fitness experts so they have a positive impact on you. The skill is organizing your eating schedule so that you're not binge eating. Yeah. The skill is learning self-control over time. You can't expect on day one, right? The skill is, and if you have weaknesses at certain points, then time lock your cabinet so that you can't eat late at night. Right? But when you look at it from a project basis, then it's a completely different beast. Otherwise, you're just going to end up adding things to the list of failures you've had. And believe me, I've had too many of those that I don't want to think about.
So you said when you try something and it doesn't work, you're viewing it as a project. So when you make these mistakes, how do you talk to yourself versus how someone else may talk to themselves when they're doing on some sort of adventure and they're failing and making mistakes? What is the right way to talk to yourself to keep yourself going?
So the first thing is I make sure to have a safety net. And what I mean by that is I have people in my life that when I can't get out of my own head, they'll boost me up, right? We all get sad. We all get depressed. We all deal with failure. And I have like 4 friends that I know the moment I get on the phone with them, my attitude will change immediately. And left to my own devices, I'm going to be a POC, right? Like it's not even a
POS?
A piece of crap.
Oh, piece of crap.
Right. Yeah. Either, both. I'll be both. Okay. And so I make sure that I'm in contact with people because nothing good will happen when I'm stuck in my own conversation.
Right.
So that's one thing. The other thing is that I've built my life and I often do things that I don't want to do because I know I'm setting an example. And I will never forget this. I was with, and this happens quite often, but I was with this buddy of mine, Nadav Wilf. We had been at the front of a 4-hour hike to a waterfall in the jungles of Panama. And when we got to the end of it, we ended up at a waterfall that's like 4 stories in the air, right? It's like a 40-foot drop. And he goes, "You want to jump this?" And I go, "No. Now let's go." Like I absolutely did not want to jump that. No rational human being wants to jump that.
Yeah.
They want to have done that jump.
Right. They want the experience.
And there's a big difference between the two. And then we went and did it, right? Like just jumped. And so I hold myself to the standard of if it's not going to kill me, I need to figure out how to do it, right? And kill me is like an extreme factor. If it's like, I don't want to be paralyzed either or hospitalized, and at times when I was in Pamplona and got crushed by that bull, I thought I was paralyzed. I thought I would never walk again.
A 1,200 pound bull, or is it much bigger?
It's somewhere around, I think it's somewhere between 12 and 1,500. Yeah. It's about a ton or so. I'll be honest, I don't remember. I just remember losing all feeling in my body and thinking I was paralyzed and time stopping. So
you're like, maybe this adventure thing isn't what it's all cut out to be.
That's literally what was happening in my head.
Damn it.
And then the other side came out and it said, "Jon, you would have never been happy or fulfilled in anything that you did if you weren't willing to be the type of person who does this stuff. And this was a fluke, and it's a terrible fluke. But you're the type of person who needs to be pushing those limits and pushing those boundaries. And so we're going to figure this out." And I literally had images of myself eating from tubes, not with a non-functional body. And somehow I was able to pull myself together. And very clearly there was something wrong with my body. What ended up happening was the bull had crushed my shoulder.
Wow.
like all the muscles around it. And the impact was so fast that it also tore muscle on my right shoulder.
Wow.
So I was a mess. It took 6 months of physical therapy, and I still get some back problems and stuff like that. But I don't regret being the type of person who does it.
Yeah.
I just would have preferred that it didn't happen.
Of course.
So,
okay.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, have you found a correlation between adventure and happiness?
That's a great question. I'm going to answer it in a really weird way. I'm not sure I know what happiness is. We often talk about it, but it seems that happiness is something that's said in retrospect about something. Like, you don't think about being happy, or maybe you do, until somebody asks you about it. Yeah. Unless you've just like fallen in love or something like that, and you're like on cloud nine. I feel like there's a relationship between adventure and being engaged and an active part of your own life. And in that, there's a lot of satisfaction. It's not comfortable, but there's a lot of satisfaction. And so I think the question is, what type of person are you? And for some people, they're really happy with quiet jobs and staying at home and reading books or playing with their kids. And that's awesome. And some people like want to take their kids boating around the world on a sea voyage. And so if it creates engagement for you, if you feel like you're totally engrossed in the activity, I don't necessarily know you have the time to think about happiness. You're too busy loving life.
Hey, I appreciate you being just straight saying that. I don't even know what happiness is, rather than give me some big answer. I really appreciate that. And I think as you said that, I think it made a lot of my audience think, what the frick is happiness? And I almost in a way where we start to think when we're so engaged in life and we don't even have time to question, are we happy?
Mm-hmm.
But we're engaged. And what's funny is, as you said that, I Googled what is happiness, and then the definition, the formal definition, just says the state of being happy. And I'm like, that doesn't help.
Mm-hmm. It's self-referential logic. It's, what are you going to, who even knows? There is a brilliant book about happiness that I loved, absolutely loved, called Stumbling on Happiness. It's by Gilbert, who's this famous researcher from Harvard.
Right.
And one of the things that I loved about it was that Gilbert gives this phenomenal example about happiness. He says, when you look at something in the distance, you know it's far away because it's small. But when you look or imagine your happiness 10 years from now, and you imagine your happiness 5 years from now, they look both just as clear, right? There's no like shrinking of the image. And so you think they're just as likely. But we all know the experience of standing in line at a supermarket, picking up some candy, thinking that the version of us 5 minutes from now will be happier having eaten the candy, and then the version 5 minutes from now hates us because we ate it. And if we can't predict our happiness 5 minutes from now, what makes us think that we can predict our happiness 10 years from now, or 1 year from now, or anything? And so it creates this really interesting question of, one, obviously, like, what is happiness, right? And then the other is, how can we design a life if we are pursuing happiness if we're so bad at predicting anything?
Wow.
And so the answer that Gilbert suggests, if memory serves, is that the best predictor of our own happiness is other people in the same situation. So if you talk to people about if you should move to California, speak to people who've just moved to California, or who are now 5 years in, and they'll have a better perspective on it than you could imagine, because you have some idyllic version of, I'll go to the beach every day and I'll run and I'll surf, and then you just do the same thing you do anyway. You get drunk with your friends at a bar.
No, I'll tell you right now, I'm in San Diego and it's freaking awesome, and you should come out here.
I hear San Diego's incredible. Everybody that I know that lives there loves it.
Yeah. So what's crazy, if you do that, we could almost find two people who will find San Diego amazing, and you can find someone who doesn't find it amazing. So if you're going to ask someone about who's in that experience, who's already achieved what you want to achieve, you would get varying answers, and you would constantly like, it's almost like, how do I pick the right choice when I'm getting two different answers about the same result?
Yeah, I think the key is to really evaluate what's important to you and to also be honest with yourself about what you'll do. Yeah. Because unless you surround yourself with runners, you're not going to become a runner.
Right, absolutely.
And unless you surround yourself with bookworms, you're not going to read a lot. The habits of the community you enter are the ones that you're going to augment in your life. And so I don't think there's a simple answer to any of these questions. I think that there's certain things that do increase our happiness or our satisfaction or any of these things. But for the most part, I'm not sure it matters if you feel really engaged in what you're doing. There's this idea that there's this perfect job out there that gives us fulfillment in our life that we were born to do is crazy. It's something that it evolved from this, I think, idea of like, oh, it's something that the rich can do, to it's something that everybody has an opportunity to do, to find fulfillment in their work, to an obligation or a birthright that if you don't have the most fulfilling job ever, that's the awesomest thing, that's worthy of being Instagrammed every day, then you have somehow failed. And it's bullshit. Like, it's just utterly ridiculous. The question that it always comes down to for me is when you speak to people about their job, when they just started, they always say the same thing. I'm like, are you enjoying your job? And what do they tend to say?
It's all right.
When they're starting a new job? What? They tend to say, I'm really enjoying it. I'm really learning a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks to what Mihai Csikszentmihalyi was looking at, that when they're doing something outside of their knowledge base or their comfort zone. And so as long as you're really engaged in something, you're going to enjoy it for the most part. Mm-hmm. I mean, you might be just engaged because there's so much pressure on you that you have to. But for the most part, if you're really engaged in your work, it's enjoyable. It's satisfying. Mm-hmm. And I think that this is what really brings us back to adventure, which is that adventure provides this catalyst for getting us outside of our comfort zone in really safe ways.
Yeah.
It allows us to grow and expand who we are and become better people in the process. And frankly, it's really fun.
Yeah.
when it's really fun, and it's really bad when the bulls crush you.
Literally. I feel like adventure is just what we are meant to do as humans. Where living in a suburban home, in a track home per se, and just coming home, going to work and then coming home and just staying warm and watching TV is a very man-made type of living arrangement. But we've only been doing that for TV 60 years or so. But it's just the whole suburban home has really only existed for maybe 75, 80 years or so. And if we go back, we've really been more wild, more adventurous. And I feel like if we are suppressing that adventure, then I want to say that we're suppressing what it means to be human.
So it's interesting. I think that there's something to that, right? We keep seeing these returns to our nature to some degree, right? Like we see there's this push for paleo diets. We see these pushes towards Dunbar's number, which is this idea that we're built for a certain number of social interactions in terms of the number of people. And so this researcher Dunbar looked at a section of the brain and how that size of the section correlates to the number of animals that you're capable of engaging with. So for wolves, it's a certain size, and for humans, that area correlates to about 150 people. And so we're seeing the resurgence of community-oriented activities, that areas that come to bring us together and social interactions that bring us together. And I think that there's something really to that there's a lot of people making a huge effort now to build communities and to get us outside of these traditional man-made structures so that it returns back to the community format of that we essentially evolved to be part of. I think that's wonderful. I think that that's really great. I think that there's organizations out there that do a great job of creating community, like Summit and Patau, and what else is out there? I mean, there's tons of stuff. TED has built a thriving community of incredible people. Soho House. And frankly, it's one of my areas of work. I started an organization called The Influencers where 7 years ago, I researched what causes influential people to engage and developed a behavioral model around it. And from that, I created a secret dinner where 12 people are invited. They're not allowed to talk about what they do or give their last name. They cook dinner together. And when they sit down to eat, everybody gets to guess what everybody else does. And they find out that it's a Nobel laureate sitting across from the editor-in-chief of a major magazine, the president of a television network sitting across from a famous author. And so I've hosted over 900 people across 100 and some odd dinners. So, and that's really turned into a wonderful community that I really rely on.
And I think the community aspect is important. I think it's essential for everyone to be a part of something. But I think the adventure is how it starts. But real quick, I want to dive into the knowledge round. Just going to ask you a few more rapid fire questions here. So Jon, are you ready for the knowledge round?
Am I ever?
So you might be wondering, why would I ever invest in a coach? I've never done anything like that before. Well, it's going to shorten your learning curve and save you the time that it would take to achieve your goal. You can avoid making mistakes that you would otherwise make. You'll get more results because everything will be tailored to your specific needs and challenges. The coach will hold you accountable so you can't procrastinate, so you can't be lazy, so you can't say, I didn't have the time. You'll be challenged and pushed harder than you've ever been pushed. You'll have conversations so powerful that you'll feel more energized, alive, and confident and certain about the goals that you have in front of you and where you want to go. Most importantly, where you want to be. You'll go farther than you've ever gone before when you have a coach. If you want to learn more about our high performance men's coaching program, go to kfmcoach.com. Again, that's kfmcoach.com to learn more about our high performance men's coaching program. You have got to understand that every successful person in the world invests in coaching to go from good to great. And if you're already a high achiever, then how much more could you achieve if you had a high performance men's coach at your side to push you even further? Go to kfmcoach.com to learn more and apply for our high performance men's coaching program. Again, that's kfmcoach.com. Welcome to the Knowledge Round, where the guests will be asked rapid-fire questions to give the audience invaluable pieces of wisdom to help transform their lives. Starting in 3, 2, 1, showtime. So what advice would you give to someone who's feeling lost or kind of unsure of their purpose?
Exposure to as much as possible, right? So creativity or inspiration can be viewed as the ability to bring together disparate ideas, but that only happens when you have different areas of knowledge or experience to pull from. Our brains are literally wired to explore and when they engage with something new or novel. So go out there and see as much as possible. Go to shows that you'd never go to. Go to events that are just traditionally not of interest to you, just to be exposed and have new and novel experiences.
I like that. What do you think is holding most men back from becoming stronger, grounded men today?
Taking that first step. You don't have to have a perfect plan in place. You just need to build up momentum and get movement in the direction that you care about. You can figure things out as they go along, but the time's going to pass. You might as well do something interesting with it.
Absolutely. And so your book here for the audience is The 2 a.m. Principle, Discover the Science of Adventure. You can grab it on Amazon, Jon Levy. But for yourself, Jon, what have been 3 of your most influential books that have helped you on your journey?
I think the writings of Robert Cialdini. So he is probably the foremost researcher on influence, and he's brilliant. I highly recommend it. He has 2 books. One is Influence and the other is called Persuasion. Yeah, and they're both excellent. Then I think that growing up, I read Peter Pan and The Little Prince, and both inspired me to explore the world.
Could be the first time someone mentioned a Disney story here, but I like it.
Thank you. And then I would highly recommend the writings of Dan Ariely. To understand how irrational we are as people is, I think, essential to understanding how to better engage and affect the quality of our lives.
Mm. And now imagine you had 60 seconds with 25-year-old Jon. If you could envision where he's at personally, professionally, maybe relationships, knowing what you now know today, what would you tell him to do? And what would you tell him not to do?
I would tell him to take a speed reading and memory course so that he could collect more knowledge, and that the acquisition of knowledge is paramount. And what would I tell him not to do? I would tell him, when you get to Pamplona, do not get in the way of that bull.
Turn left.
I would definitely tell him not to do that. And then I would direct him to go more into research earlier on. I think that was really my calling. And I think that there's something to be said for increasing the knowledge that can help society.
What do you think he needed to hear the most?
That it'll all work out. That it might seem like the lessons he's learning and the skills he's developing don't have a clear path, but it's all building up to something. And so just you got to keep going and keep learning and keep getting out there and risk failing and so on.
It's beautiful. Philosophy on life. Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Is that it? Would you say this is it, or have you covered it here?
My philosophy on life?
Mm-hmm.
Or
yeah. Do you have a statement, a sentence, something short here?
I think I go back to what I said previously, which is that the size of our life is in direct proportion to how uncomfortable we're willing to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so unless we take on the discomfort, we're probably going to live pretty small lives. And there's so much to do out there, and there's so much that society needs, that you need to put your own feelings aside and be willing to be uncomfortable so we can tackle those issues.
I love it. And Jon, what's exciting you now today? What adventures are we cooking up today and in the new year here?
So I'm doing this free diving thing to have superhuman, breath holding or whatever you want to call it. I'm working on that. I'm working on my super memory. There's this guy, Jon Levy, who isn't me, who has a super memory course that I'm taking.
Yeah. I think I'm pretty sure I've interviewed him.
Oh, have you? He's a really nice guy.
Yeah.
Super nice guy.
He's got the TEDx talk, I think.
Does he?
Yeah, I believe so on that topic. Yeah.
I'm going to do Wim Hof, and then I have a few other projects in mind. But I started this new series of kind of fun social experiments where I find a one-way trip somewhere, and me and a friend board the flight and essentially don't really know where we're going, and then have to figure out our way home based on a series of rules.
What are those rules?
It could be anything from we have to spend less than $100 per person getting home. And that could be really hard depending on how far you are. It could be we have to convince strangers to put us up for the night. So I did that a few times. I did it where did I do it? I did it in Lima, Peru, and in Nice, France, where I dropped myself off, didn't know anybody, didn't have a place to stay. And I was either going to convince a stranger to put me up for the night, or I would have to sleep on the street.
I feel like your skill set is in many ways closely related to that of Jason Bourne. You hear what you just said? I'm gonna go someplace and figure out how to get back with $100. You could probably get in the CIA with
is
that.
A trained killer. I said
one of many skill sets. That would be an important one.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go ahead and for the audience here, Jon Levy, you can check out his book here, The 2 a.m. Principle, on Amazon. And then what is your website? You have is Jon, JONLEVY, TLB.com, but I'd recommend just Googling Jon Levy, LEVY, and 2 a.m. Principle. His website pops right up, and you can grab his book on Amazon, The 2 a.m. Principle. Jon, thank you so much for sharing your story, giving us some extra time here so that you can dish out all the knowledge you shared with my audience.
That was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you for listening to the Knowledge for Men podcast. Hundreds of interviews and millions of downloads later, we're continuing to build an international movement, and we're just getting started. So if you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and leave a helpful review in iTunes, because it really helps the podcast grow so we can impact even more men in the world who need this. Guys, this is all about living with purpose, where every day you only do things that matter to you. You wake up, live with purpose, and take massive action towards the life you want. And always remember, love the life you have while creating the life of your dreams. Go to kfmfree.com to get a surprise bonus I've made for my listeners. Again, that's kfmfree.com for something that's changed my life, and I'm offering it to you for free. Also, check out my Amazon best-selling books that I've written for you to help you crush life at kfmauthor.com. Again, that's kfmauthor.com to see all the books I've created to help you break through in life. This is your host, Andrew Farabee, founder of knowledgeformen.com, and I'll see you in the next episode.